David Graeber, Professor of Anthropology here at LSE, author of Debt, the First 5,000 Years, heavily involved in the global justice movement, the Democracy Project, and now, of course, coming out soonish, Bullshit Jobs.
Yes.
Now, we've got a problem. This is a 4-minute spell in which you're supposed to defend Beveridge's hatred of idleness, one of the great giants that he despised with poverty and squalor and so on. Yet you, I suspect, might be broadly speaking in favour of idleness.
I'm in favor of idleness that's voluntary. I think that if people were left to their own devices, they wouldn't be entirely idle. But what I'm really objecting to is idleness at work, sort of pretend work. I think that increasingly people go to work and simply pretend to work.
Is this about hours? Is this about the length of time people work, allegedly in inverted commas work? Or is it about the quality of what they do? Do you have an ideal work which would allow you to agree with Beveridge that idleness is to be forfeit and rejected?
Well, I suppose that Keynes's idea of the 15-hour week would be appropriate if we had to set hours. In terms of what sort of work there's a general consensus that people feel is necessary. Bear in mind that 40% of all people in Holland and 37% of people in the UK feel their jobs are entirely unnecessary. If it were to vanish, it would make no difference whatsoever.
But the lack of necessity doesn't lead them to give up. That's what's interesting. So they can perfectly consistently say, my job's not necessary. I love it. I enjoy it.
If you look at the number of people who are happy at their jobs and the number of people that feel their jobs are unnecessary, there is a small overlap between that, but it's not a lot. It's I think it was 3.7% in the Dutch survey where they actually asked, and I think that's because some people hate their families. Some people just want to get away. They like their colleagues. They get their gossip there, but that's a pretty small number.
So good jobs defined in a way by the length of time in a week you might do it, rather than being union backed, being paid a good lot of money. Both of those could still produce for you an unnecessary job, a bullshit job.
A good job is a job where you feel that you're actually doing something that contributes to the world in some way, and you're doing that amount of work which is appropriate to getting it done. I think people left to their own devices would choose all sorts of different work regimes. Some people would work all the time because that's what they're like. But what I'm really saying is you should trust people's instincts. Yeah. People know best themselves.
In a nirvana society, one of which Beveridge would have disapproved, you could choose between a salary for just being alive, the finished thing, or you could work 15 hours a week, or if you're really into it, you could work more. That'd be your kind of spectrum.
Exactly. And I think enough people would work more that the number of people who work less would be more than compensated for.
And then what would they do in their spare time in your imagined world?
At the moment, someone did a survey and discovered that 49% of all work being done in the UK is not for money. If you count housework, charity work, volunteering, all these other things. So you would just expand that zone. If people are doing that much work for the love of it, or just because they feel something needs to be done or ought to be done, well, there'll be much more of that if people are free to follow their own ideas.
So you really are against idleness. You don't want a guy slumped in front of the telly with a 6-pack of beer paid by the state watching the races. You're quite a moral guy. You want them thinking, engaging, creating, going to the movies.
Yeah, well, I always say look at prisons, right? Even where people are given lodging, food, access to television, given the choice between sitting in your cell watching TV all day and actually working in the prison laundry, well, they withdraw work rights to punish people. Mm-hmm. People want to do something. And these are some of the most antisocial people we have in society. They still would rather work than just sit there.
Right. You're in a balloon, and there are 5 giants in the balloon with you.
Okay.
Want, disease, ignorance, squalor, and idleness. Mm-hmm. How do you persuade people in like 20 seconds that you should be left in that balloon, that you are the biggest giant of all, that idleness is the main cause of problems in our society?
Well, I think enforced idleness is because if you look at levels of depression, if you look at levels of anxiety, we have a society which is just, people are just nervous wrecks. How did that happen? And I think idleness at work, the fact that people are basically doing work which is useless, so that's a very specific usage of idleness, causes people to become pathological. They become depressed. They become ill. The social costs are just enormous.
David Graeber, thank you very much for submitting yourself to this Beveridge Gearty Grilling. Thank you.
My pleasure.